this question of, vegan cannibalism, vegans attacking and denouncing other vegans just to get views, just to get their little bit of money, their little bit of fame. I just had a comment, ethics applies to how human beings treat other human beings. Very true. For me, a lot of the issues here in publishing on YouTube are fundamentally similar to questions of publishing books. You have to be rigorous in writing a book, in nonfiction. What ideas are really your own? What ideas are you borrowing from other people? Where are you being influenced by other people's work or research? What's original? What's derivative? It's a crucial, ethical issue that you have to be upfront about. To what extent are your opinions based on really reading another person's work or not? To give you an example, I used to write about, history of religion. It's totally possible that I would post something where, post, I'm using internet terms. I would write an article or contribute to, an article to a book where I would have to say as a disclaimer, look, I'm responding to this other scholar's work about Buddhism, but I actually haven't read his book, his books or his articles. I haven't read his work on Islam, because the same author will have written on more than one topic. That may not sound like a big deal, but it really is part of having intellectual integrity. It's part of the moral code of being an author. I mean, so honesty doesn't just mean you admit when you've done something wrong or terrible. Honesty in publishing, in writing, in being a creative person, or in being a scholar or intellectual, or even debating politics, means that you're upfront about what you know, how you know it, how you came to form your own opinion, and even your motivations, even talking honestly about why you're pursuing this point. So, I mean, what I see on YouTube within veganism these days with this kind of cannibalism, it's lacking all of those virtues. So when I talk about keeping it real, I had a question from Peanut Butter. That's a name. That's a person named Peanut Butter Jams. I had a question saying, well, what does keeping it real mean to you? I always used to point out that one of the crucial problems with museology, with the way museums present their information, was that museums lacked any such code of honesty that you would have in writing an academic article or in publishing a book on a topic. You would have a museum making a claim. I remember one that really offended me. There was a totally political hatchet job in a museum in Washington, D.C. about the history and politics of Sudan, aka the Sudan. And at that time, I had actually done some research on the history and politics of Sudan. And this was full of lies. And, of course, that would be offensive if you were actually from the Sudan, etc. But at that time, it was linked to making excuses for the Clinton administration's policy in Sudan, which included some bombings, dropping some bombs on a medicine factory and some other bizarre things. So, I mean, when you look at text written on the wall in a museum, why doesn't it have to live up to the same standard as text written on a page in a book or in an article, etc., right? And so I've got to kind of ask the same question about keeping it real and the ethics of, what we do here in the digital vegan demimonde. I do not think it's ethical to come on camera and say, well, I haven't watched your video, but... How can I write a critique, for publishing an article, saying, well, look, I didn't read the book that I'm reviewing, but here's my review. Well, I didn't read the primary source document. I haven't, if you write an article saying, oh, well, I haven't read the Constitution of the United States of America, but here's what's wrong with it. No, you got to read it, and then you got to cite what other scholars have you read, whose opinions are influencing you, what are your sources in terms of the information, and in terms of your attitude towards the information. And you even have to talk honestly about what motivates you. So, I mean, why are you criticizing this part of the United States Constitution? And it makes your writing better. If you're writing an article, keeping it real, it makes you less pretentious. It makes you, it may engages with your reader. So you might begin an article like that by saying, look, when I was 10 years old, there was a shooting on my block, and somebody was shot dead. And then when I was 11 and 12, I followed that case when I went through the courts. And since that time, I've really been concerned about how the Constitution is interpreted in terms of the right to own guns. Great way to open an article. And it's honest, and it's real, and it's human, and it's meaningful, and it's worth talking about, right? But now you got to say, okay, here's the research I did. And you've got to, I mean, if you never read the U.S. Constitution, you shouldn't be writing the article at all. Here's what I read. Here's what shaped my thinking. Here's what directed me. That's all the stuff you should share in an intellectually rigorous, honest way. You know what I'm saying? So what does keeping it real mean to me, and what does it mean in terms of the cannibalism, these, nasty, backbiting attitudes? It's more than just not lying. It's more than just admitting when, like Vegan Cheetah, you're making up a story or lying to people. You're intentionally, generating gossip that, he knows to be false. It's really a step beyond that. It's about being honest with yourself, and it's about, a kind of rigor that, again, one of the good things about it is that it's more engaging with your audience. I admit to you guys all the time, look, I care about this issue because it reflects my background in Buddhist studies. It reflects my background in doing humanitarian work in Laos. It reflects my background in the caring about the politics of China or some research I did in Japan, whatever it is that brought me to that. And, again, if you watch that one video I did with Zarya, The Agony of Activism, we talk honestly about what it's like being around animals that are having their throats slit, what it's like being around the violence that's a normal part of the slaughterhouse industry, of the meatpacking industry, what it was like for me to be in Laos on a farm. So, again, I'm talking about my motivations, I'm talking about my source information, I'm talking about why I care, and now here's my argument for you, right? Whew. That's it. I mean, that's keeping it real. Keeping it real is an academic virtue. It's an author's virtue. It's a stand-up comedian's virtue. And I mean, what we do here on YouTube, it incorporates elements of all those genres, right? In some ways, it's a lot like stand-up comedy. And in some ways, I mean, if you're going to get into criticizing the material on my channel, yes, at a minimum, you've got to actually watch the video, and you've got to be honest and forthcoming about what you watched and why you responded to it that way. And I was talking to another YouTuber in a private conversation by Skype the other day, and he was saying some really weird stuff about my channel. And at one point, I just had to ask him, my channel is over 400 videos. About how many have you watched? And he said maybe 5. By the end of the conversation, I thought more like maybe 3. I wasn't mad at him. But very often when people have misconceptions about what I said or why I said it, what the theme or the thesis of the video was, the reason is because they haven't watched the video. Let alone, of course, they haven't watched related videos. So yeah, citing your sources, being honest about what you know and how you know it. It's not just for writing a university paper, people. It's something that makes your whole life meaningful. It's something I've got to be honest about even if I'm doing a review of a rap album on the internet. How did I come to listen to this album? What were my expectations before I heard the album, etc., etc.? This pattern I'm talking about keeping it real, it's a lot more than just university papers.